All right, thanks everyone for joining and taking the time out of your day to discuss retention in the workforce. So we're all obviously aware that workforce is such a critical hot topic at the moment, and not only in our industry, but across all industries. Doesn't seem to matter whether you're in regional or metro Australia, everyone's seeking staff or apologising on their services due to lack of staff. I begin today's session by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm presenting, the Wiradjuri people, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders on the meeting today. For anyone that doesn't know me, which I think everyone does, I'm Amanda Carter and I'm the People and Culture Manager at AMPC, and I'm also joined today by Andrew Moore from Response, who's going to be doing the first part of the presentation, and Craig Lefaux from Two Stone in Albury, who will be talking to us about machine learning. So today's session is designed to discuss two projects. The first one fits around the retention. So at AMPC, we've been hearing for a long time and across industry, that retention was an issue, but there had never been any studies done on what the extent of that issue was. So we decided to embark on a project back at the end of 2019 to actually try and quantify what the extent of the turnover across industry was. But not only that, we find it, we really wanted at AMPC not only to just get that data on what the turnover was, but then also really to work with the individual sites to help understand what are the drivers behind that turnover, and then also work with them to put systematic systems in place to help try and improve and that turnover, which I think that's the critical part to the projects. No point in having reports on what the extent of the issue is without then actually being able to provide some solutions. So Andrew's going to talk to that project today, and then we'll hand over to Craig from Two Stone, who's got an exciting new project that we've been working on around machine learning, and what's sort of the possibilities of using machine learning in not only our industry, but with retentions across all industries, in terms of can it be used as a tool to help predict turnover. And there's a few different ways depending on the company on how they want to look at it. Identify different opportunities to be able to talk to groups or cohorts or individuals about are they a risk of leaving, but also to help understand all the the ones that are staying. So why are they staying, and be able to have a look at what those cohorts look like, because that could then help in your selection of people. So Craig will discuss that in further today. So I'll hand over to Andrew Moore from Response to give us the background findings in their project. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Amanda, and good to speak with everyone again, although we can't see each other. You can see me, I can't quite see you, but good to speak with you all again. Thanks for coming along. This is just a bit of a presentation I'll run through. Many of you will know the details about this because we've been through it before, but it's a presentation just to give you the background and some more detail about what Amanda has introduced here, and that's the retention project. It wound up a few months ago. However, we're continuing to spread the message and talk to people about retention and what can be done on site to improve retention rates across the industry. I guess the genesis of it all was that, as Amanda said, AMPC have been hearing for quite a while about retention being the #1 issue across the industry, and so the members were surveyed and at meetings, and there was quite a big majority of people said it was the biggest issue. So it was then decided that we would do this project, but it wouldn't just be a research project and here's a report and then we're out. It would be much more extensive than that and give us an opportunity to assist all as the participating plants to understand where they are comparatively across the industry, but also then a big part of the job was to identify what excellent practices were happening inside the industry, try and piece them together in one framework, and then give every one of the participating plants the opportunity to compare their performance against that framework, because the idea is that not one size fits all, that every site will have different issues to deal with. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. We came up with a priority list based on that framework, and each site was different. So all 25 sites were different, and we worked with all 25 sites to not only identify what the priorities were, but then to help make plans or take steps to improve those retention performances. So we started in August 2019, and as many of you will know, we were only part the way through the research phase of talking to the different plants when the pandemic hit and things shut down. So the industry and the participating sites were excellent to continue working with us to do that research and do most of it virtually. In fact, I think the last 14 or 15 sites were done virtually, so it was really really warm reception. So like I said, research, development, adoption were the three key parts to this project. We spoke to 740 people, collected about 16,000 data points. When we spoke to people, we were very interested in their sentiment about what they feel, how they felt like they were treated in getting a job, learning to do the work that they were assigned, and then seeing that there may or may not be opportunities for them to progress into the future, amongst other things. But we were really interested in finding out how people felt about the experience that they were having. And as it turns out, those experiences have a definite impact on retention rates inside a plant. The more positive the experience, the better the retention rates. So the other part to it was that it was we designed it to talk with newly employed people, because the hypothesis was that there was lots of new employees leaving, and that it was more new employees than longer term employees leaving. So the other issue that we'd run across was that people who have left the organisation are not readily available to talk to and interview in a project like this. Often when they abandon, we can't get in touch with them, or people aren't really keen to talk to a researcher after they've just left employment. Plus, often people don't want to burn any bridges and be clear about what they're telling you. So we spoke to newer employees, and essentially we were asking them, why did they stay, rather than why are they leaving. So we didn't use those words, but that's in fact the message we were getting, was to say these are the things that go well, and when they go well, we can see a future, so we hang around and we stay. And we know when things aren't going so well that people start looking elsewhere for other opportunities, and especially in these really difficult labour market times that we're here. The other time that we're in currently. So the other thing we did, we spoke to managers or anyone in a leadership role. We just grouped them all to call managers. And what we asked the leaders was to predict what they think the people might say about their experiences, and that turned up some interesting results as well. Again, the high performing sites had in terms of retention, had a fairly close correlation between what the managers predicted people would say and what people said. The sites that didn't perform so well had a bigger disparity in what the managers thought the people might say to what they actually said. And in I think in almost all cases where there was a big disparity, the managers were much more positive about what people's experience might be than what the people's experience was itself. So it was an interesting piece of work, and some results that I'll show you in a minute. The development phase was, our work was to, like I said before, pull together excellence practices of excellence, and piece it together into one framework that said, here are examples and case studies where people have actually been doing excellent work, and it's a really good idea for you to, on your site, to compare your performance against those excellent performance, and you might be able to identify some areas for you to work on. And in almost all cases, we found some high priority areas. In a few cases, we actually identified some priority areas, but they weren't urgent because they were actually addressing those areas quite well. And in some of the exemplar sites, they were actually they couldn't find anything that they really needed to work on because they were doing some really good work. So what we did, we asked people to identify on that matrix of authorised and productive that you may have seen before. But again, what we were able to do is to say which ones of our systems and our behaviours inside our business are the keys that we need to put our effort into. So then once we'd collected the evidence, we'd created the framework of excellence. We then started to work with each of the plant managers and their team to explore where at their site might be some areas that they needed to concentrate their efforts in. So although we came up with industry-wide data, the most important data, I think, from this project has been the site-specific data, so that the site management teams can actually compare their performance against the other sites and then identify where they can make some improvements, rather than it just be a one blanket. And as we'll see later on anyway, some of the overall data doesn't show any clear correlations between some of the things. Some of it does, and some of it doesn't. But once you then home in on the individual plants, it became really important to understand each of the plants' own performance. So the key findings: turnover results turnover rate averaged at 62% across the. We ended up with one of the 25 sites not being able to furnish us with their data. So we had 24 sites with an average of 62% turnover, which is quite high. And the other part to that is it ranged from in the very low 20s to over 100%. So 108% was the highest turnover. So it confirmed, those numbers confirmed that the AMPC members, they were correct in saying that they have a problem. The first 30 days service, there's lots of mythologies around the industry to say that people only come for a few days or leave at smoko time on their first day. You know, we've heard all of those stories. In fact, this is the percentage of all leavers who leave within the first 30 days. On average, that's about 15% of all leavers. So at around 1 in 8 leavers go in the first 30 days. So that tells us that across the industry, we're actually not doing a bad job in that first 30 days. It's actually not until you get to the numbers on the 180 and the 360 days that it starts to show a bit of a pattern. And the pattern's quite clear, is that 52% of all leavers could not make it until 180 days, so they couldn't get through 6 months. As well, over 2/3, so that's 68% of all leavers left in 2019 before their year was up. That's a lot. That's a lot of people leaving, and especially if you've done all the training, you've kitted them out, you've done all the training, you've put them all around the place, you've done whatever you can, and then people leave on you, then there's some estimates about, Craig's going to talk about that, estimates of what it costs a plant to lose and then have to replace somebody. Then that's just straight financial cost. You also, of course, have your quality costs, your throughput costs, and opportunity costs that you'll miss out along the way. This was an interesting one, the length of service, as you could predict. The plants that had the lowest turnover had the highest average day of service for the leavers. And then the higher the turnover, the lower the days of service for the leavers. You can see how that would be the case. But what this is interesting on this graph is those 3 markers over here that are well and truly off the curve. Each of them had their own reason for being outliers here, with high turnover and high length of service of people leaving. So the longer serving people were leaving in droves or in big numbers in 2019. 2 of them, it was because there were shift changes, going back from 2 shift to 1 shift, and people felt a bit, what's the word, uncertain, insecure about their work. And one of them was a leadership change where plant management changed in the 12 months prior to this. And let's just say that the leadership style was less than conducive to longer term employees staying around. It's probably the best way I could say it. Plant size and company size had something to do with it. The larger organisations had a better average turnover. We think that's because of the systems and ingrained behaviour. and then the highest turnover was amongst the smaller plants. So you can see that there's probably something to do with that. But this is interesting. The location really, they were on much more of a par in location. So remote, rural, and metropolitan, you couldn't really take much from that data, which was interesting. So that's the results. A lot of the classifications had a lot of bearing on turnover, which is obvious because if you're a short-term employee, then a short-term visa holder, then you're not expected to stay for long. However, short-term visa holders, the more short-term visa holders plants had in that time, the higher their resident turnover was as well. And we think that has something to do with the work that the frontline leaders are doing in trying to manage short-term employees in their team. They start to treat everyone like a short-term employee. I'll keep moving because I'm short on a little bit of time. So leadership was interesting. When we spoke about leadership, it wasn't just supervisor that people spoke about. They spoke about everyone they came into contact with on a plant. So we just asked simple questions like, how do you feel you're treated by the leaders around here? And they'd talk about the person at the laundry, or the people at the canteen, or the security guy on the gate, or the HR officer they spoke to this morning. So everyone they see as a leader. So when you're thinking about leadership development, don't just stick with your supervisors, I think is the point from that. And then, of course, we found that there are, if their systems were fractured and siloed, then what would happen is they'd blame each other for turnover issues. So HR would blame ops and ops would blame HR. If they're not well integrated, then they work together and on a regular basis meet to follow things through on that. So these were the priorities areas in the in the framework that were most identified. Integrating employees into the buddy systems, rotation of training, things like that was the #1 issue across the 25 sites. And then ongoing development was the next one, and the leadership they got was the third one. Then it was identified that on this next level, these three things were next: integration of systems, actually measuring and reporting, and then having a workforce strategy that made sense. They were also key findings. Like I said before, there's a whole range of sentiments. One of the interesting ones was across the whole site. Leaders' prediction was that it would actually be quite a positive experience, although it might get a little less positive over time. But in fact, the employees' experience was much more. It started out okay by applying for a job and going through that whole selection process, but then things started to fall away. So as time went on, people are having less and less positive experiences in the business. And this is an example of positive versus negative sentiment of people going through the business. So you can see just some examples of some of the plants who were able to say, look, we do this part really well on Plant 22 and that part really well, but we really should focus our attention on ongoing development. And that's what they did. We communicate well. Our leaders are, seem to be communicating well, but we really need to do something about our training and development process into the future. So that's how we will be able to use these processes, these sentiment data across all of the different sites. That is my time up, Amanda. And like I said, quite a bit of information to go through if I need to, but there's my 20 minutes.
Thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome.
That was really informative, and I think we'll open up questions after Craig goes through, if that's okay.
Yep.
I had one quick question for you while it's sort of everyone's hot on their mind around, have you had sort of you've obviously been communicating with those plants sort of post the project, and I know it's relatively early days, but have you had any really sort of good results that people are starting to see through their systems that they've been implementing?
Yes and no. So yes, we have had a number of people tell us that we've changed that and we're getting an excellent result, and we've introduced something, and so we've had some examples of that. We've also had some examples where people have said, can you leave us alone for a bit? This is a very tricky labour market. We'd like to sort of focus our attention on and that's okay as well. And of course, what we try and remind people is this is the time to focus on retention.
Yeah.
If you can find an employee, you need to keep them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably a really good segue into Craig. So everyone, we've got Craig Lafaux from Two Stone. So Two Stone is an Albury-based company, and I'm sure Craig can give us a little bit more information and background on the company. But this is another project that we're currently doing with Two Stone, and it's really looking at predicting your turnover and looking at what are those key drivers why people sort of are staying potentially. So there is absolutely a positive use for this tool, as well as also then highlighting, are there interventions that possibly could happen, like are there red hot spots, that you can drill down into a particular floor or department to have a look at what those issues are. So before I give too much away, Craig, I will hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Andrew. Two Stone. So as Amanda mentioned, we're based in Albury. We're a cloud decision intelligence company. So what does that mean? We look at business intelligence reporting. So we combine multiple sources of data from your business, whether that's production data, HR data, supply data, bring it all into a data warehouse and create automated visual reporting. And then we also create machine learning models, which I'm going to take you through today around the HR component, around being more predictive. So a lot of the BI stuff is looking at where we are now and what's happened previously, whereas the machine learning starts to predict what you need to do in the future. For today, though, really focusing on the retention and the project that we've done alongside AMPC. But first of all, there's just some stats, and what is the true cost of turnover in your organisation. Now, Andrew mentioned that the average turnover across the meat processing industry is about 62%. So we found a little calculator within the Victorian Government website that actually calculates the total cost of turnover within your organisation. So when I put an average employee wage of 60,000, I put an average turnover rate of 62%. And also coming from Andrew's studies was that average plants are about 568 employees each. It actually comes out to the cost of turnover if you're running at 62% is about $6.7 million. Now that obviously takes into a lot of things into consideration around training, recruitment, potentially lost productivity and so forth. what it does come down to, on average, around $20,000 to $25,000 per employee or per person that leaves your organisation. So a direct cost to the bottom line. Now, if through either using some machine learning or other sort of tools that Andrew's taking you through, if you lower that by 20%, you're looking at close to $2 million in savings. So it really does look at a dollar value. Obviously, there's a lot of other soft benefits of reducing turnover around morale, around leadership, keeping the knowledge within the organisation, reducing the stress on current employees and so forth. But it does really have a direct dollar benefit if you can bring that turnover down. So if I look at what we've built alongside Amanda, this is a diagram of a cloud environment. So what you've actually got here is we take a number of different data sources. So we could take we'll take your HR core data. We might take demographics, tenure. We might take rostering, compensation, benefits, or salaries, and so forth. We could even take injury data. We could take LMS data. We could take the talking to Andrew about the data that they've collected around the surveys and stuff. We could even build that into the model as well. So what we're looking at is bringing multiple sources of data in. We then warehouse that data, and then we run so we've actually built a machine learning model that runs over the top of that data and starts to predict who is at risk of leaving your organisation in the next 12 months. So not who has left, but who is actually at risk of leaving in the coming 12 months. So far, what we've found is with base core HR data that, and what I mean by that is employee ID, when do they start, how much leave are they taking, potentially salary, a few of those core HR data fields, we're actually predicting 60% of the people who will leave in the next 12 months with an 84% accuracy rate. We're also starting to find, as we put in those additional data sources that I've mentioned, the accuracy rate and the number of people that we can identify is actually going up. So it all comes down to what sort of the mix of the data sources that we can get from an organisation. When we run the machine learning model over the top of the data, we then display that into a dashboard. So that's what you would use to actually start to analyse data or look at who's at risk of leaving. We also can create just a standard HR dashboard, which we're starting to put together around ISO HR metrics, so standard HR metrics across Australia. So not only do you get your prediction component around who's at risk of leaving, we also utilise that HR data to have a what I call a standard HR reporting dashboard, but all automated and visual, which I'll show you a demonstration very shortly. I just wanted to put this slide in just for a little bit of an explanation around machine learning. So when we take all those different data, so you can hopefully see here, you've got current role, employer location, standard rate, tenure, leave, age, gender, visa type. They're the sort of data sources that we load into the model. What the model does, and it says feature important, so it then comes out and says for that particular organisation, the most important influence on someone leaving, for example, here is current role and location. Now, depending on your organisation, that feature set might change. We've ran this over a number of organisations now, and for example, one organisation actually leave, and the types of leave was higher on the feature set for that organisation than current role or employee location. So the model will automatically pick up the different data and the different trends and then populate with the right feature set based on you. We also will be going down from to a level where you can identify the feature set by employee. So what is their reason or individual reason for actually looking to leave an organisation? So that starts to generate the ability to have conversations either at an individual employee level or within potentially management into a group of employees, or potentially a group of butchers or forklift drivers, whatever the split may be, so that you can look to put in programs to actually reduce the overall retention rate. So if I go into a demo, so as mentioned, we run the data, load the data, run it through the machine learning model, and then we populate a visual dashboard. Hopefully you can see that. What we've got here is you've got current headcount for organisation. So this is obviously a large organisation. We have the current turnover. Now, when we generally need 1 to 2 years of history data. So machine learning learns off history and what's previously happened. So we need at least 1, probably 2 years minimum of history data. It starts to then look at the current turnover rate, then starts to make a prediction. So it starts to predict who is at risk of leaving in the coming 12 months. So we say here it's 50-50 at the moment. It's 50% are going to remain and 50% that are going to depart. We then, based on that prediction, can calculate on a standard sort of $20,000 per person, the cost to that organisation. So that's your high level type dashboard. We then go down here into some more detail, so you can actually start to drill into more detail around what the prediction has actually provided you. So we've split the data up by manager ID. You know, often we hear that one of the key reasons people leave is dollars or manager. So we've looked at it by manager. We've got age group by role. You know, visa type has a fairly big impact from a meat processing point of view. By employee type, whether they're permanent, contract, full-time, and gender. What you're actually seeing here is, if I look at the manager ID here, you've got last year's headcount, you've got this year's headcount, and then this blue dot here is telling me the percentage of that is going to, who is at risk of leaving that organisation. So then what I can actually do is I can drill down on that particular manager. So now what I've gone down is from a high level view of that manager down to some more detail. Now I'm looking at the particular headcount for that manager, the turnover rate, and the prediction. Then when I go further down here, I'm actually now starting to identify, and we're doing it by employee ID and not name, but I'm starting to identify who is at risk. So the ML outcome, who is at risk of leaving in the coming 12 months. Because I've collected all that data, I can start grouping it by all sorts of different ways. So I can look at, you know, current role, I can look at location, obviously the manager, who's a team leader. I can look at it by age. I can sort, you know, by visa type. I can sort by whether full-time, contractor, part-time. But generally, what I'm starting to get is who is at risk. Probably one of the key ones is current role, where I can start to group it by, you know, whether they're forklift drivers, whether they're butchers, where they actually work, and see if I've got some common trends or common issues within a certain group of employees that is going to have a fairly major impact on my overall business. If they, you know, if you had 50 butchers and you've got 25 or 30 of them at risk of leaving, then you potentially have a significant issue within your business that you need to resolve pretty quickly. I just go back to the key or the main dashboard. So other features, you know, you've got filters down the side. You can look at different dates, so your calendar functions. You can look at it by site, if you're a multi-site type organisation. It's coming, whether it's an Eastern plant or Western plant. So all different types of things you can actually view and look at your data. We then start to look at some different sort of ways. So we can have an overall look at turnover within your organisation. I can look at the impact of leave and who's taking leave and so forth across my organisation. When my departures and new hires are coming, so when are people actually departing? So we have a heat map around trends of when people actually leave and when people start. So if you can start to pick up that you've got trends around March or February, then that you can start to do planning around in December, January to start hiring for people And then overall, I start to go into, I'll call it a standard HR dashboard. But what we're now looking at is starting to look at all the different HR metrics. So not only do you have the prediction model already you can start to address, you have the HR metrics around your FTE counts, your recruitments, time to recruit, all those sorts of things that generally you utilise to manage your HR departments. But the key part about this is what we're trying to do is automate this reporting as well. So you have a prediction model that predicts who's at risk. You have your HR reporting. You start to put programs and so forth in place around how to reduce your overall turnover and improve people staying. But you can start to track the success of those programs because your data continues to refresh, keeps to be up to date. So you can actually start to more or less in real time say, yep, this particular program or this particular decision, or even this particular manager change has had a positive impact on our overall organisation. So that's really the quick view of retain machine learning. It's quite an interesting topic, obviously machine learning and how you do the predictive component, but we feel it's something around a piece of technology that can be reasonably easy deployed. We believe we can deploy this in 4 weeks with your existing data. So it's not necessarily around having to create new data. It's data that's existing in your current systems. We can have it running. We can train the model, and we can populate these dashboards in about 4 weeks. So you can start utilising the insight coming out of it to make decisions to reduce sort of turnover.
Thanks, Craig. Craig, just while you're going, do you want to sort of talk through those steps around data? And it's been quite interesting, the data journey, and I know Andrew probably had similar findings on the variance of different data across the industry and the different systems, and probably almost the lack of data analytics that's actually happening in the HR space in industry at the moment. And then I guess, obviously you can take that data, but with that machine learning, there's a component to it about the more you put in, and it was to your first slide, the more different fields you put in. Can you explain that a bit more? It helps the model better.
Yep.
How that works.
Yeah, so I mentioned previously we look at base HR data. Yeah, so there are going to be data fields that we require just to make this work. Yeah, so employee ID, start date, leave, potentially salary, those sorts of things that we need to make the model work, and that gives us a level of accuracy. Now, from getting that data, generally you can write a quick little report program within your HR system and extract it to a CSV file. We can then load that into a data warehouse and start running the model. So it's actually quite quick to get up and running. That gives you a level of prediction and a level of accuracy. Then if you, and that could be phase 1. Yep. So you can have a snapshot of where you're at pretty quickly. Then you can actually start to improve the overall accuracy and what the model can start to predict. And therefore, if this is why we use base data to start off with, because some people might have good learning and management data, other people may not. Some people might have really good injury data, others may not. Some people might have a good rating system, rate their performances between 1 and 5. You can start to put that data in as well. So the different data sources that we can get will continue to increase the accuracy of the model and the prediction. However, you can start with that base level.
Great, thanks for that. I might open up to the floor. If anybody has any questions, feel free to come off mute or put a question in the chat. If you've got any questions for Andrew or Craig. And maybe while you're thinking of your first question, Andrew, I've got a question for you. So our current industry turnover is at 62%. Yep. And a quick Google search around the manufacturing rate in Australia is currently at 9.5%, which is actually the highest it's been for a number of years.
Yep.
What do you think the stretch target or, goal for our industry is, noting that like our best performing plants are currently at about 23%? Is being able to reduce it by 50%, is that actually realistic? Have you got any views on that?
Yeah, I think for our industry, with the way it works, our target should be in the teens at its worst, I think.
Yep.
I think that should be the target for the industry, is to go, we need it under 20.
Yep.
Now, the people who are getting 21, I think, was the best. They work really, really hard to get that. So it's even a stretch for some of those organisations, that really put big effort into making sure that people's experiences are really something.
Yep. And I think that's where I sort of see the two-stone technology being able to also come into then, analyse that data for a positive side of it. So in terms of, well, where are my hot spots? Is it my loadout? Is it a particular age demographic? Is it for people that are first commencing? And then with the knowledge that you've got and that those resources you've built up through the community of practice that can be shared, being able to then say, okay, well, we've got this particular issue in an area, let's go have a look at some case studies or something like that that may help, or at least it identifies it for a company.
Yeah, and as well, it's that old story that you can't really manage something unless you're measuring it.
Yes, correct.
And that's where, the two-stone data dashboards and the information that you can get from those dashboards, like Craig's shown, is just invaluable, so that you can continually measure. Again, without some software and work like that, the real good exemplar plants do things like they meet once a week and talk about who's left, what are my needs, so that the department heads, human resources, training, operations, everyone meets and they have a stand up for 10 or 15 minutes, and they were able to tell us or tell each other the name of the people who had left that week or were going to leave soon. They knew exactly where they were going, why they were leaving, what they're up to. That's at the top end of the spectrum. So they're measuring it all the time, but they don't have anything like the dashboards that Craig has.
Has anyone got any questions that you've thought of for Andrew or Craig before we sort of wrap up? So Craig, I really noticed that massive number of, $6.7 million, and that's for an average processing company, and that's looking at the 25 based off the data of the 24 plants that supplied data. That's a huge potential opportunity. And I know you've also been speaking, you went to a conference sort of recently around, and that also depends on salaries and things like that. And, it's that training time, isn't it?
I think there's a lot in that number. I have a feeling too, for the 20K on average is probably not including a lot of the softer type components of it. It's probably more related to sort of, recruitment and training and so forth. But, you think about if you're running at 62% turnover, then it's a little bit of a vicious circle, isn't it? You just keep going, and the people that are remaining are getting fairly impacted as well, because there's just turnover all the time and the pressure that we'll put on those existing staff that stay.
Great. Well, no one's got their hands up or jumping in with any questions. So please feel free to, and we can do it at the end. But I'd just like to thank Andrew and Craig for this very informative session. Unfortunately, we had a number of people that weren't able to attend due to production constraints.
Yes.
And we'll definitely be sharing this webinar with them and also the wider industry. So if you do have other people that you want to share it with, we will be sending out a link, and it will be in the next AMPC newsletter. Just also wanted to say in closing, if anyone's interested in exploring further their retention strategies, please don't hesitate to reach out to Craig or Andrew. And I also just wanted to let you know about another project that we've got with Toustone at the moment, which is around developing proof of concept. So it's basically giving you a trial around creating a dashboard like the HR dashboard, but it doesn't necessarily have to be HR. It could be around safety metrics, could be around environmental metrics. So this will allow companies to actually have a look at your data, and you'll be able to visualize that data. So it's, and then that can create the discussion internally around how do you drive data forward. And is there the benefit of having some data in, whether it be a smoko room or, as Andrew said, like a take 10 meeting each day where it's just a visual snapshot. So if you're interested in that, we've actually got 2 spots left on that project. Most of them have been snapped up, but if you are interested, please reach out to either Craig or myself, and we can give you some more details around that. That's actually a core project with AMPC, so it's a free of charge to do a proof of concept. So thanks everyone, and enjoy your afternoon.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.